Is coffee, roasted fresh daily in Batavia, Illinois.
When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity this afternoon at 2, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy and Trump's key economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, on Meet the Press this weekend. On Sunday, he doesn't see a recession despite what Democrats are hoping for.
Well, I tell you what, I sure don't see a recession. We had some blockbuster retail sales consumer numbers towards the back end of last week, really blockbuster numbers. And in fact, despite a lot of worries with the volatile stock market, most economists on Wall Street towards the end of the week had been marking up their forecast for the third and fourth quarter. That echoes our view. You know, what we've got here, consumers are working at higher wages. Right. They are spending at a rapid pace. They're actually saving also while they're spending. That's an ideal situation. So I think actually the second half of the economy is going to be very good in 2019.
Yeah, not just low unemployment, higher wages, and I don't know how to break this to Democrat Socialists.
What?
The wage gap is shrinking.
Oh,
no.
Come on, now you've gone and done it.
Past 3 years, white-collar workers, which encompass 40% of the workforce, have seen their wages grow by nearly 7.5%.
Nice.
During the same period, all of the workers, a group almost entirely comprised of non-college grads, have seen their paychecks grow by 10%. Well, that shrinking wage inequality, isn't that what they say? The indicators that Kudlow is looking at?
I don't deny that the energy sector has slowed a wee bit as prices have come back. On the other hand, money is flowing into the United States. We're the hottest, really the only game in town. And I think that's a very positive development. And we're seeing some pickup in manufacturing jobs and construction jobs as well. And incidentally, Chuck, one last point. Low interest rates, interest rates, which is across the spectrum, is a very good thing for housing, for construction, for automobile sales. So low interest rates, no inflation, virtually no inflation, Chuck Todd. So I actually think it's a pretty good story. And
yeah, but he's not saying what I need him to say. The Democrats, you're right, are so hell-bent on having a recession because that's the only way to take down Trump. The
economy has lowest unemployment rate since 1969, record stock prices, record after-tax corporate profits, record single-family home prices, weekly wages growing faster than inflation. I just mentioned the narrowing of the wage gap. And the number of people getting food stamps is the lowest it's been in nearly 10 years. And that, according to Elizabeth Warren, is a lot to worry about. Kamala Harris. I mean, then they just make up stuff. This is fun. And Jim Garrity has a sort of a National Review, a nice little summary of all of the dystopian diatribes of the Democrats. Kamala Harris predicts as many as 300,000 auto workers may be out of a job before the end of the year.
And based on what?
I don't know, but that's nearly half of all auto workers.
Right. That's not going to happen.
Joe Biden claims the top 1% pay a lower tax rate than teachers, firefighters, and cops. That's not true. Kirsten Gillibrand, she's just delightful, claims Trump promised manufacturing jobs would stay, but they're not. Well, as a matter of fact, since Trump took office, the U.S. has added 486,000 manufacturing jobs. So I don't know if you characterize that as staying or being created sui generis, but they're here, Kirsten. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, and I forgot, a proprietor of Branson Palatine.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, very good. Jim, so you've heard Kudlow's optimism. You've heard the Democrats' dystopianism, and what say you?
Well, full disclosure, first off, Larry and I have known each other for 15 years, and I tend to defend him. However, arguments that we've had in the past, I do sometimes think he's a tad bit too rosy as a starting point. Mm-hmm. But this isn't. I don't necessarily think this is one of these times. I think the data is there. There's no question that some data has slowed a little bit, particularly globally. the yield curve inverted, which to some people means a lot. To me, it means absolutely nothing. And if you want to get into that, I'd love to. So the reality is, I think Larry is mostly right. It's his job to be a little bit rosy. I mean, he's selling something now. He's in politics,
Right.
But I think he's mostly right. And one thing you didn't mention, which I think is fascinating, is that federal tax receipts. Remember, we had that huge tax cut that was going to just destroy everything. Federal tax receipts are up. Now, that can't be right? I mean, they cut taxes, and yet they made more money? Yeah, of course they did, because anytime you're in an oppressive tax environment, if you cut taxes, receipts go up. We knew that was going to happen, and the Democrats are just, shocked by that, which I don't understand.
The funniest expression of that was on MSNBC yesterday when, I don't know, they're all the same to me.
Yeah.
They were saying the only thing that's prevented a recession so far are those evil corporate tax cuts. Like they're upset that they're blaming the corporate tax cuts for growth, and we would have had a recession otherwise. Darn it! It's just remarkable to listen to.
Absolutely absurd. Yeah.
Well, what about there's a possibility they're talking this morning about cutting payroll taxes. Do you think that's feasible?
Do I think it's great? Do I think anytime when the federal government is taking too much of tax, and again, someone will come at me and say, "Well, federal taxes aren't that." Yeah, the tax environment around the whole country, whether it be county, municipal, state, and federal taxes, the whole aggregate, we're at a very, very oppressive tax point. So anytime they can cut taxes a little bit, I think that's a great thing. I'm not positive this specific thing. The consumer has actually been a pretty good bright spot, even though some things have been slowing a little bit. So I'm absolutely for it. I'm just not sure it's the exact best way to do it. But again, I'm not going to argue anytime they're going to give a tax cut.
So the inverted yield curve on the 2-year and the 10-year, since this is sort of one of the talking points of these economist entertainers on cable news, tell us why you don't think it's an important indicator.
Okay, and if I start to go too far off the reservation, tell me, because I don't want to bore anybody.
Amy will start to cry.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just start to cry. So 7 out of the last 9 times that the 2s to 10s yield curve inverted, meaning that the 10-year rates go below the 2-year rates. You guys know that, of course. Now, it's predicted recession. Now, the recession's been an average of 14 to 19 months in the future, so it's not exactly like they flipped the switch right away. Now, however, this is the point that, to me, makes it different, and not just a little bit different, but wildly different. Over the last 10 years, the world's central banks have engaged actively to try to compress long-end rates through quantitative easing, and they've done a great job of that. Now, to put this in perspective, of the last 6 times the yield curves inverted, at the time of inversion, the 10-year yields were approximately around 8.5%. This time when it happened, 10-year yields were about 1.6%. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you spend 10 years trying to push those 10-year rates lower and lower and lower, thinking that it's going to be a panacea to the economy, and then all of a sudden those 10-year rates go lower than the short-end rates, I mean, they were manually put there. It's not that it happened organically. Now, yet that to me doesn't take every bit of importance away from it, but it takes a solid chunk of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's an interesting point. But now the follow-up to that would be, but we're in uncharted territory, as you're describing, and unwinding from quantitative easing is traversing new terrain, number one, and so that's replete with danger. And number two, you have President Trump taking Powell to task yet again and essentially suggesting we need to go back to quantitative easing.
Every president takes the Fed to task. It's just most all of them did it behind closed doors. I take that back, the exception of one. Barack Obama never took the Fed to task because Barack Obama had the luxury of zero rates basically the entire time of his presidency. So there's stories about Reagan. There's stories. Somehow I wish I remember the story about somebody actually getting in a shoving match with the Fed chairman, one of the presidents, and I wish I had that one for you now, and I can't remember what it is. But this is not unusual at all for the for the president to want lower rates. I think it'd be silly if they didn't. Now, I think that they're wrong in wanting that. I think rates held inorganically low for too long caused huge malinvestment and a big bubble bust cycle, and we've seen that twice in the last 20 years. I think they're absolutely wrong, but I don't think it's newsworthy in the slightest. The fact that Donald Trump talks directly to us instead of doing it behind closed doors, that's the story, not the things he says.
And you're in agreement with what he's promoting, though, another 50 basis point cut in the rates and and the loose money policy.
No, I didn't say that. I
Okay,
actually don't
okay.
think I am in agreement with that. I think that it's a mistake. I think the Fed right now thinks that they're supposed to prevent every recession. Prior to 30 years ago, recessions occurred like every 2 to 4 years, and it's kind of, to me, it was always like a trimming of the hedges so the bush can grow better. Now, in the last 30 years, we have an activist central bank that tries to head off every recession. And I think what happens is just coils the spring and builds up bubbles. We saw it in tech stocks and we saw it in real estate. I think recessions are supposed to happen, and I don't think it's the Fed's job to stop them. I think it's the Fed's job to take a sharp edge off a recession when we find ourselves in it. And I think they've forgotten what their goals should be.
I heard that if there's not a recession now, there's going to be one in 2021.
There's always going to be a recession, right? So yeah, who says these kind of things? Like it's going to happen on April 6th, 2021. Like I just it baffles me, the hubris. Like first of all, I actually don't think there's going to be a recession. It's not in the next, I guess when you say that you have to qualify it with a time period. I'd say in the next 2 years. And that's not a high conviction thing to me. There's always things to worry about. There's always black swans that could happen. But these guys who say, it's going to happen in 2021. Come on. There's plenty of chaos theory to go around there.
Well, this is why the old saw is, right? Economists have predicted 12 of the last 4 recessions, right?
Amen.
I mean, it's
exactly.
always
and
this.
I love that joke because it's so spot on. Right.
What about this one? If you laid all the economists in the world end to end, they couldn't reach a conclusion.
I love that again. Right? Also, remember about the world of economics, too. Most of the economics are beholden to certain, a lot of these think tanks pay them for certain results. Economics is not exactly the most trustworthy science in the world. That's why you got to find guys who are more in the private sector, who are economists for companies, who are traders, who are macro analysts. I'm not a big fan of all the ones who are, taking paychecks from one side or the other politically.
And do you have an economist joke for me now that I've given you 2?
I don't. You put me on the
Come
spot.
on.
Radio host joke?
I'm not an entertainer like you. I'm just a guy who talks.
You're a guy who you make burgers when
And
you
a
want
restaurant
And I
tour.
make good burgers.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? What kind of burger? What's your
We do a
bestseller?
quesadilla burger that's on a tortilla with homemade pico de gallo and guacamole. It'll change your life.
What is that, about 150 calories?
It's very low calorie. You will not.
No, a tortilla. Is it corn tortilla or flour tortilla?
It's a flour tortilla. So I'm gluten free myself, so I occasionally will bring in corn tortillas for me. But our cooks like to make it on a flour tortilla. I don't know why. I've been fighting with them for a while. People seem to like it.
All right, Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor by day, restaurateur, Branson Palatine by night. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. See ya.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The